My name is Haley Cusimano, and I am a GMAT instructor, tutor, and content creator. And I'm joined today by a panel of folks here to talk to us about INSEAD's program admissions, their perspective both as alumni and from the admissions department. So very excited to have our panelists here today to chat with us. Now, before we get started, we've got about a 15-minute presentation planned, as well as some Q&A to follow. So those of you who are joining us live, please jump into that chat and ask any questions that you have. And if it isn't addressed in the presentation, rest assured we'll go ahead and chat through those topic areas during the Q&A session. So before we formally get going, I'd love to get a bit of an introduction from our panelists. So by all means, Maria, if you'd like to get us started, a little bit of an intro from each of you.
Sounds good. Hi, everyone. My name is Maria Reis. I'm responsible for student recruitment at INSEAD for the Americas. And today I'm joined by two alums who are very supportive, and I'm going to hand it to them for them to do a brief introduction. Nikhil, you want to go first?
Yeah, thank you, Maria. Hi, everyone. Really excited to be here. I'm Nikhil Khosala. I was INSEAD 16J, so graduated about 4 years ago. Currently the director of growth at SquareTrade, a company based out of San Francisco. Great. Over to you, Aditya.
You want to unmute yourself.
Hi, guys. Thank you, Maria, and thank you, Nikhil. I'm Aditya Amonkar. Excited to be here. I'm also actually 16D alumni, and I'm based in San Francisco, work in product management, but happy to answer any of your questions and looking forward to this engagement. So thanks, guys.
Very good. Thank you, guys. Thank you for joining. I know you probably are on your lunch time, so thank you for joining us. So as I mentioned, we have just a very brief presentation, about 15 minutes. Hopefully I won't go over that, but it's just to give us overview of the full-time MBA program. And for those of you who already know a great deal about the program and have seen these presentations before, please use this as a reminder of possible questions you still have for us during the panel discussion. So I'm going to rely on Ailey to move my slides, but the first slide is just to let you know that INSEAD is an international MBA program. It's an international school. We have 3 different campuses, one in Singapore, one in Fontainebleau, which is right outside of Paris, and then Abu Dhabi. And then most recently, we also opened a Center of Innovation in San Francisco in February. That's not a campus, but it's a space for our alums to have events, a space for non-degree programs to have class. So it's also posted on a website if you want to learn a little bit more. So just very briefly about each campus, so you get to see a bit of some pictures. This is the Fontainebleau Campus, which is right outside of Paris. It's about 45 minutes from Gare de Lyon. It's a small town, but it's very tourist, so lots of tourists that come and go every day in Fontainebleau. The campus is located next to the forest of Fontainebleau, which is an amazing place for those of you who enjoy the outdoors, rock climbing, hiking. This is a wonderful space. So I encourage you to visit next time you are in France. It's a wonderful town. And then I'll move to the next slide. And then the Singapore campus, it's located in the Knowledge Center, so quite different from Fontainebleau in terms of the space. It's very urban. Within a few minutes by metro, you can visit the city, the country, Singapore, which is a fabulous place in terms of entertainment, places to go out, just wonderful for those of you who enjoy visiting the city. It's also where our students do quite a bit of traveling when they are in Singapore to Southeast Asia. And I'm sure you'll have an opportunity to ask our panelists a little more about Singapore and the opportunities. The Abu Dhabi campus is more recent. It's located in the Maria Island. We just relocated a couple years ago. So there's a lot more attractions and shopping. Before was located in the financial district. This is a newer campus. Usually our students in executive MBA program have class there. If you're interested in the Middle East, we have 2 intakes. I would suggest the September intake, which now allows you to spend one of our periods, which is 2 months in Abu Dhabi campus. So for those of you interested in learning more about the Middle East and wanting to connect with companies in that area, the September intake is really the one that gives you the opportunity to spend more time in this campus. A little bit about the portfolio of programs we offer. So today we're going to talk about the full-time MBA program, but I wanted to point out a new program that we just started in May, and we have the first class on campus now, which is our Master's in Management. So for those of you who have friends out there who maybe are graduating this coming year from undergrad or just graduated, this is a great program to launch your international career. It's really targeting candidates between 0 to 2 years of work experience. So if you have friends who aspire to go overseas for an international program but are not quite ready for the MBA program, this is a program that we just opened in May, and the first class is on campus. But today we're going to focus on our full-time MBA program, and I just wanted to give you a little bit of the stats of this class. And I think it's just coming up. I see that the computer, the internet's moving very slow. This is a little bit of what the class looks like. So typically we have 2 intakes, and each intake's about 500 students. So what you see there is for the January intake and the September intake combined. So the average work experience is around 6 years. Of course, it doesn't mean that everyone has 6 years of work experience. Typically what we see is the majority of the class will be between 4 to 6 years, and then we'll have a smaller percentage between 2 to 3 years, and then on the other side of the curve, another smaller percentage from 6 plus up to 10, sometimes 11. So if you are on both ends, you know, it's still good. And it's a big class, so each intake's about 500 students. So even if you are either at the beginning of the curve with limited work experience or at the other end, you're still going to find a lot of people with a similar profile. The program is just 10 months, so less than a year. We have 2 intakes. The January intake, you start in January and then you graduate in December, and that intake has the summer off. So if you're very keen on doing an internship, this would be the intake. And then the September intake starts in September, and then you graduate the following July. So this one doesn't have a summer break. So to give you a little more in detail of what the program looks like, as I mentioned briefly, we have periods, and each period it's about 2 months. And then in between each period, there is a week off. So when we say you don't have breaks, it's not quite like that. You do have some time off. And of course, depending whether you are in Europe, in France, or in Singapore, you also have their public holidays. But there are 2 intakes, and they're the same resources, the same opportunities, with the exception of the September intake. I mentioned before, you have an opportunity to go to Abu Dhabi. With the January intake, you don't have the opportunity to spend an entire period there, but you can go in between periods in that week off if you have a specific interest in knowing more about the area. We have field trips that you can go, and I'll show you a little bit more later on that as well. So On P1 and P2, we're going to focus on our core business classes. And then starting in P3, you can start customizing your own curriculum according to your career goals. So at INSEAD, we don't have majors or tracks. It's a general management when you graduate, but it allows you the opportunity to design your own curriculum. We also have the option for you to do one period with our partner schools. So we have 2 partner schools here in the US and 1 on China. And typically it's either on P4 or 5. And then just to give you a little more detail in terms of what happens in each period, as I mentioned, we added one period zero, which we wanted our students to really leverage all the resources that are available to them when they arrive on campus. So P0 starts the moment that you've been admitted into the program. It is a list of items to complete on the career development side, but also on the academic side. And this is available to you the moment you are admitted into the program. And then on P1, P2 will be all the core business classes. And then starting on P3 will be when you start customizing your curriculum. Just a couple things at the bottom there that I want you to make you aware that happens in parallel to the academic periods. One is the career development period. So just to give you a brief overview, what happens then, the academic periods happens in parallel. And what this means is that on P1, P2, this is a time for you to meet with your career coach, to together develop a career plan in terms of what types of jobs, industries, regions of the world where you want to find an opportunity after graduation. And then on P3, now that you have a career plan, you start attending a variety of workshops ranging from job search to salary negotiation. This is also when employers start coming to campus. So they will do industry presentations, networking events. And then on P4 and 5, this is when you start interviewing with potential employers, both on campus and off campus. So as you think about what campus you want to be, whether it's in Fontainebleau or in Singapore, this is something to keep in mind. This is also something we can discuss with our panelists, how they went about strategizing what campus to start and graduate. And then one more resource I want to mention that it's also listed on the slide that happens in parallel is the leadership program. So at INSEAD, you probably heard it's a little bit like the United Nations. Everybody comes from a different country. We typically have between 90 to 97 nationalities. And as you can imagine, that brings a lot of different types of communication styles, different team dynamics. So we also offer as a resource a leadership program, which means everyone will get a leadership coach. So where you'll have one-on-one with your coach, and then you'll have also peer coaching with in small groups. And then the curriculum for the leadership program is also integrated in some of your electives. So I mentioned just very briefly that in between academic periods, there's about a week off. This is when our students do quite a bit of traveling when it's possible. Some of the traveling is travel that they organize, but we also have travel that are electives that you get for credit. So one of them, if you were very interested in Abu Dhabi, for example, and you were in January intake, you could take a week off. These trips are guided by faculty members or some of my colleagues in the employer engagement team. So for example, we have one here in the US in Silicon Valley. Typically, we'll visit different startups in Silicon Valley with a professor, and then you spend some time at our new Center for Innovation there as well. So they're short trips. I don't know if one of our panelists had the opportunity to do any of these trips, but this is a great question to ask them. But some of you might be already thinking about working on the application or even working on the application. So I just wanted to give you a little overview of what we're looking for. So when we review your application, there are 4 areas that we look for. So the first one is, can you do the academic work? Can you handle the rigor of the program? So we're going to look at your previous academia experience. We also will look at your GMAT score or GRE score. Sometimes we'll consider what you do for a living. So some of you might have a very quantitative background. Maybe you are analysts, maybe you are engineers. So we'll take all of that in consideration when determining whether you can handle the rigor of the program. Then the second area is your leadership potential. So some candidates might already have lots of opportunities in their work, whether managing a team or a budget. For those of you who haven't had those opportunities yet, then we look for things you're doing outside of work. Maybe you do volunteer work for a nonprofit organization where you might be part of an advisory board. Maybe you had a startup when you were an undergrad, or maybe it could be fun things too. Maybe you could be a soccer coach for a girls' team. All of those things kind of speaks to your leadership potential. And then the third one is your ability to contribute to the program. So you're going to join a very diverse group of individuals. As I mentioned, it's a little bit like the United Nations. So your participation in class, it's key to keep the class very dynamic. And the application per se is for us to get to know more about you as a person. So any extra activities that you do that gives us a little more insight who you are. So for example, if you are a juggler for Cirque du Soleil, tell us about that. That's something unique about you. And then the final one is your international motivation. So this is going to come in a variety of ways. So maybe you did a study abroad program, maybe you speak other language, maybe you already traveled the world, or maybe you're already working with international clients. Maybe you are a multicultural individual. So all of those things tells us a little bit about your international exposure and motivation. And in this section, it's not so much about how many places you've been in the world, but more about what you've learned from those experiences. So as the admissions committee looks at your application, we're looking for these 4 elements, and we're trying to determine what experience, both professional and personally, are you adding to the diversity of the class. So a little bit about the application requirements, very similar to US programs in terms of letters of recommendations, GMAT scores, essays, all of that. We have one item that some schools in the US are doing that as well, which is the video interview. This is not something you should be alarmed by because the admissions committee at INSEAD doesn't actually see you live. This is another way for them to learn a little bit about you as a person. The other reason is because only 20% of our students are native speakers of English. So this is another way for us to see how well you sound in English. So for this side of the world, I think this is something you should not worry about. We also encourage you, if you're in the process of researching different programs at INSEAD, we also have many scholarships. So if you're looking to apply for scholarships, we usually ask you to target round 1, 2, or 3. You can see all of them on our website. They are usually aligned with the application deadline. So if you're currently working on it and you're trying to figure out which is the best round for me to apply, I would say if you're considering scholarships, then it would be round 1, 2, and 3, more on 1 and 2 than 3. If you don't care about scholarships, then I would say applying when you're ready. There is no rush. We have 4 rounds. We make decisions at every round. And these are upcoming deadlines. The one thing that I want to mention that it's come up quite a bit in previous intakes, we were making a lot of exceptions for the deadlines because a lot of the GMAT centers were closed. So currently we're back to sticking to our original deadlines. So because a lot of the centers are reopened, and also because GMAT now you can take it, the online version, we're accepting that. Before you could only take it once. Now they're allowing you to take it twice. So for the moment, we are following our current deadlines that are published on the website. All right, so I'm going to end here. And I'm going to ask our panelists to tell us a little bit about themselves and why they decided to pursue INSEAD and maybe why an MBA. So whoever wants to volunteer first. Sorry, I have this green in my face, which is, it's bothering me. So I hope you don't care. It looks very, I'll try to pull back. Can you see it? Okay. Good. So who wants to go first? Aditya, you want to go first?
Sure, absolutely. Let me talk through some of my experience. Thank you, Maria, for putting it on. So I'll give you a little background about myself, and then I'll open it out for the questions in the Q&A section, right? So I joined the December batch of MBA of INSEAD MBA. So that, like Maria said, starts from January to December, right? And the reason I went for that kind of batch is that it allows for a summer internship. And I really wanted to, after working for some years in the corporate run, I wanted to give myself that independence, that if I wanted to take an internship in a field where I want to explore some stuff, I'm able to do that. So that was one of the important things for me. I was based in, I am from India originally, but I was based in New York before I applied for the MBA. So it took me to Europe. I wanted to explore Fontainebleau, which is an amazing place to be in. So I highly recommend choosing that campus for at least a semester, irrespective of the geography that you want to end up in. But I spent my entire 12 months over there. I call myself a Fonty lifer. That's what it is when you don't move campuses. But I enjoyed what I did. I spent some time. I went for a couple of the trips that Maria mentioned. And I landed up back after the MBA in San Francisco, where I wanted to be. So I think the call out year that I wanted to make out is that INSEAD is a global school. I think apart from the academic efficiency that you will attain, it's an opportunity to work with like 90 nationalities, people from 90 nationalities, and that's an experience you don't get anywhere else. And so having studied in the US before INSEAD, I was like, INSEAD is the right place to get that mix of both academia as well as real life experience working with other cultures. And that was one of the big reasons I chose INSEAD. So happy to answer questions, but I'll let Nikhil talk about a little more of his experience before we get to that.
Thank you.
Yep.
Thank you. What about you?
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Aditya. You know, as you were speaking, I was like, a lot of the things that you said are very similar to my own kind of story and rationale. So similar story to Aditya. Did my undergrad in the US, and then after working here for 7 years, I decided back to school. I think it's important. I had a lot of folks telling me I should go back to MBA right after, I was done with undergrad, a couple of years of work. I think I always call out that it's important to know why you're going to MBA rather than just doing it because people are telling you. And that was kind of the situation that I had. At one point in my career, I was like, I would love to go back and learn. And so I had that kind of inertia that pushed me. So I started applying. I applied to 4 schools, INSEAD being one of them. 2 of them were based in Europe, and then 2 of them were based in the US. And eventually decided on INSEAD for the reasons that both Maria and Aditya mentioned, right? You'd be hard pressed to be able to find a community where you have 80, 90 different nationalities and you're spending, 10 months literally every waking day with this group of people. So that for me was far and away kind of the most attractive factor about INSEAD. I think the other thing for me that played into my decision making was similar to Aditya, right? I'd spent a lot of time in the US. I hadn't spent much time in Europe. I do have an international background. But then as I kind of started thinking about it, when I applied, I was close to 30. So I was kind of at the upper end of, not upper end, but at least in my mind, the ideal time for MBA. And one of the things that I really liked about INSEAD was the average age in general was a little bit older than US programs. And I think that year to 3 years of maturity, I realized had such a big impact when I was actually in class, because all of a sudden when you have folks that have 5 to 8 years of experience, the content of what they share, the maturity of their perspective is a lot different than when I contrast that to my conversations in the US and undergrad. And so for me, that was kind of the second factor. The other piece for that was, again, everyone has their own individual circumstances. For me, I wasn't ready to go in for an 18-month or 2-year program. The opportunity cost of that was just too great. So again, I share these as small examples, and I think everyone needs to kind of have their own rationale. And my first piece of advice would be to think through that rationale and know exactly why you're going. And I think that will help you kind of deduce to what is ultimately the right program for you.
Great. So a couple more questions before we open up. Can you share a little bit, because I get this question all the time. It's like, okay, how do you decide between going to Singapore and Fontainebleau? What strategy did you use, and did you have an opportunity to go to visit both campus, or the 3 campus?
Nikhil, you want to go first?
Yeah, I can jump in. So the one thing that I didn't touch on earlier is I was a 16J rather than Aditya being a 16B. So I was in that period that started in September and ended in July. And so we did not get that 2-month internship. In retrospect, I would highly recommend doing it with that internship. I think internships bring a lot of value. I think INSEAD actually does a phenomenal job of bringing the right folks to the campus, both in terms of your job search as well as your internship. So in retrospect, I wish I had done it that way. My circumstances at the time just didn't allow me. That being said, I think whether you do a July or a December, I think the program is going to be amazing. In terms of how to kind of figure out, I knew. I very quickly realized that I probably wasn't going to come to one of the US campuses in period 4 or 5, just because I'd spent a lot of time here. But then I knew I wanted to do both Singapore and Fontainebleau. And having spent, 10 years in the Midwest, in the tundra of Minneapolis and Michigan, and prior to coming to INSEAD, I knew I didn't want to be in France for the winter months. So I spent the first 2 periods, Mary, is that right? I spent first 2 periods in Fonty, and then flew to Singapore for period 3, which was perfect. And then flew back to Fonty for period 4 and 5. So my suggestion is, if you do the July start, do kind of the first period or the first 2 periods in Fonty, go to Singapore. You're going to use up all your points trying to get there, but it's so worth it. And then if you're in the July timeframe, I would say come back to Fonty, because that's where kind of the big graduation happens. And if you're in Fonty, you get to I don't know if it's still the case, but we graduated in this like big chateau.
Yeah.
Incredible experience. It's like Versailles to someone that had never really been there. So highly recommend it. Would encourage you to go to all campuses, but depending on where you're starting, I'd break it out in different ways. Sorry, that was long. Over to you, Aditya.
Thanks, Nikhil. So I think a little different from what Nikhil mentioned from my experience, right? I think there is a lot of talks, even before you join INSEAD, during the INSEAD, I think everybody has an opinion, right? Which campus is the best at what period? And I think each person should kind of look at it from what they want to get out of this, right? One is the ability to experience both campuses, which Nikhil said is absolutely true. No other school gives you that opportunity, so why not, right? And I think both are very different cultures. I think, I don't know if Maria mentioned that, but when you get into it, a school, the INSEAD program is divided into the 5 periods, right? And I think at least for the first 2 periods, I think you cannot change your campus. So for the first 2 periods, you are, because you have your core classes and your core groups, you are limited to the campus you choose. That being said, there is a timing to these things as well. Like Nikhil said, you don't want to spend the winter months in Fontaine. So a lot of people starting in September do take that Jan period to be in Singapore. But I think from my experience, like I mentioned, I was a Fonty lifer. I spent all 10 months or 12 months in Fonty. And that's because I had something where I wanted to end up my career with, right? And so a lot of people in the P1, P2s is all about getting that experience. But the P4, P5, the latter two are when you're going to spend most of your time in kind of looking for your jobs. And those two are probably the most important on where you want to be, right? Or where you want to end up in your career search. And so for me, I was looking at being either in Europe or the US. And so I chose to be in Fonty during those times. Other friends I know wanted to be in Asia, and so they spent some of those points that you get to make sure that they landed up in P4, P5 in Singapore. So I think each one it's an individual call out. Again, a lot of decisions are made because where friends go, where the job opportunities are. So I don't think there's any right or wrong way to do this, but I think you got to look at it on an individual perspective, right? It would be wrong to say that I want to land up a job in Hong Kong, but I am like my last semesters are in Europe, because companies just don't think like that, right? They come to the Singapore campus mostly, right? And they want to interview you, and you'd rather be in that zone networking with people and companies. So that's the way I would think about it.
Good. So I am glad to see you both had different strategies. So one on the weather, and then the other one based on career placement. So excellent. So I don't know if we're ready to take questions, but maybe just a follow-up. I think one of you mentioned about P1 and P2, you can't move campus. And the reason for that is because you're working on your core business classes, and we design these small teams, which you're going to be working for the first 4 months of the program. So maybe can you share a little bit about what those study groups are and how they work?
Yeah, I can go first if you don't mind, Nikhil.
Mm-hmm.
Yep. So I think let me just explain it the way I took away from it, right? So I think INSEAD in the first 2 periods focuses on core electives, and which is basically the foundation of anything MBA, right? So finance, marketing, organizational strategy. And so what INSEAD tries to do for the first 2 periods is that put you in a group with 4 or 5 other people. But the magical aspect of this one is the way they kind of organize you into groups is that they look at individual students' strengths and put you in a group where you will always start out with being uncomfortable, because they are probably not in your same personality zone. They don't probably have the same skills that you. But what INSEAD really tries to do is, as a group, you should be set up for success, right? And so the way I experienced it, I came in from a tech and media background, not so much in finance. And so I would think that I was the weakest link from a finance perspective in that group. But from a takeaway perspective, I kind of lean on some of my teammates to kind of put that, add that skill set that I needed for the finance classes. But as a group, it helped me grow on, and we grew up, right? So that doesn't mean that the person who's strongest in finance in that group will do all the work. I don't think that's the way INSEAD figures that out. But at some point, you kind of lean on those people to, complement your strengths and weaknesses. And I think that group is probably the most important set of friends you're going to make in INSEAD, I think, right? And it was a wonderful group. I don't think I would have met all those 4 other people in my group, but I think we are long-lasting friends far after INSEAD, and they continue to be my voice of reason 4 years after the MBA. So that's good.
Good to hear. But Nick, did you had a similar experience or different experience? Who were your teammates in that first group?
Yeah, I was going to build off what Aditya said. I think, very similar experience in that the folks that they put us with were so different to our own experience and who we are, right? It's both experiential as well as personality. And the aim of it, again, not knowing kind of how they decide the groups, but the way I think about it is they, force contention, right? Which I think is really good because this is a safe environment where you can look to develop those skills. So for my group, we had a consultant from Cyprus that was working in the UK. We had like entrepreneur that was from Portugal working in Bangkok. We had someone that basically ran an entire manufacturing plant out of China. And we had half Syrian, half Palestinian that was living in Saudi Arabia working for a telecom giant. And then we had me from the US. So truly very different, like past experiences, past cultures, but also working experience. And kind of the same thing that Aditya said. I got married after INSEAD. All these guys were at my wedding. I'm still, regularly in touch with them. We actually just had a Zoom call last week. So, and this is kind of coming back to that Fontainebleau, Singapore. I think Aditya will kind of speak to this, but one of the advantages of being in Fontainebleau versus Singapore in this urban environment. So, you interact within the INSEAD ecosystem, but then you spend the majority of your time, I'd say, outside the INSEAD ecosystem. The one advantage of Fontainebleau is you're, for better or for worse, you're in the middle of a forest and you're surrounded by folks that only speak French for the most part. So folks like myself that didn't speak French, I basically lived in this like INSEAD bubble and ecosystem. Again, better for worse. But being in that bubble, you basically form these relationships and bonds, right? Literally, you're seeing the same people for 10 hours a day for, 2 months. And so the way the campus is set up, there's a lot of like opportunity to interact outside of class. There's foosball, there's squad, there's a bunch that you can do. So again, I think the groups that they put you in are super helpful. You build these bonds, you develop skills that I think will benefit you while at INSEAD and beyond.
Good. And after that, you still have teams, but their team classmates, you have input on that, and then your professor, so you're not so tied in. So anyway, thank you for sharing. Ailey, I don't know if you have questions from the audience. If you want to moderate that,
Sure. Yeah, we sure do. We actually have quite a few. I know you all spoke in a good bit of depth around kind of the global nature of the program. We had a few questions around the duration of the program as well. In particular, if there's anything around the experience of a 10-month program versus a 2-year duration program that students or potential students should be aware of, and any advice that you have for a program that maybe has the potential to move fairly quickly.
Want to go with it?
Sure.
I can.
Yeah, go ahead. Go ahead.
Okay. My 2 cents, I think it kind of comes down to your individual circumstances, right? For me, applying close to the age of 30, I knew I didn't want to go for a 2-year program. Retrospect, having gone through a 2-year program, I would say irrespective of your age, I think you can do a 1-year program. I think the opportunity cost of being out for 2 years, irrespective of where you are in your career, having gone through a 1-year program, I feel like you get the same value out of it. Because ultimately, being fully transparent, and Maria, I apologize if I'm not supposed to say this, but ultimately, I think the biggest value that you get from an MBA program is the network that you build, right? The relationships that you have. The learning and education is a critical part of it. But I think ultimately for a lot of people, it's having that piece of paper that says, hey, I got an MBA, I'm intelligent, and I can be a value add to your company, right? And so when I think about those 3 pieces, I think you can accomplish a lot of that in a 10-month program, which is super important. I think I got more out of my 10 months at INSEAD than I did my 4 years at University of Michigan. And it wasn't to say that INSEAD is a much better school. It's just where I was in my own head. Like, I went to undergrad because I was told I had to go to undergrad. I decided to go to an MBA and I paid for my MBA. So all of a sudden, this was a lot more valuable for me. So again, I keep coming back to that: know why you're going and when the right time for you to go is.
Cool. So I have a very similar perspective. So I think two key parts of why I chose INSEAD, right? So INSEAD was the only school I applied to because that's what I wanted to go at that time of my life. The return on investment and the kind of things I wanted to learn, INSEAD was the perfect program, and I still support it, right? That being said, right, after coming back to the US, I am on a group with a lot of people who graduate from MBA schools in the US, right? And we often talk about the 1 year versus 2 year, right? And I think this is how I think about why people come to an MBA, right? People come to an MBA to kind of change what they are currently doing or kind of get accelerated in their career, right? And when you're looking for a job perspective, there are three things you can really change from an MBA, right? You can change your geography, you can change your industry, or you can change your vertical perspective, right? So either you're an engineer, you want to move into product, um, you're an individual contributor, you want to move to management. That's the way I kind of put it into it, right? Now, from my perspective, and I think Nikhil will also support me, we were at a time of our careers where we believe that a 1 year gets us to do what we want to do next, right? The network and all INSEAD was great at doing. But when I talk to people coming from American schools, people are at different times of their careers, right? Some of them also take more to figure out what they want to do with the rest of their lives. And I think that's where you have to think about whether that 1 year and 2 year works for you, right? So there are people who have come from an engineering background, move into finance, and from a learning capacity from building that network, you need to move from engineering to VC based or in investment banking. 1 year might be too less, right? So I think you have to think about what you want to get out of that 2 year program. Sometimes, personally for me, I felt if I wanted to move into a complete finance based career, I think 1 year might have been too less because you also work on adrenaline, you work on like in steroids at the INSEAD 10-month program, right? Because there's a lot to take up in those two months. You learn a lot, but if I was a slow learner, if I wanted my more time to get that experience, I would have probably chosen a 2 year. And I think it comes down to individuality. From my perspective, 1 year was perfect to get what I wanted. I wanted to move, my career. I wanted to move into a more business development, product management role in the same kind of industry. So 1 year totally made sense. And I still hold by what I decided to do. But there are people, and I can't convince them on why they thought 2 years were good. So I think I think it's personalized. I think I talk to a lot of people who want a 2 year, and like once you rationalize that in your mind, that decision becomes easier. So
Wonderful. So we actually I'm going to try to cluster a few questions into one for the sake of time here. Several questions related to these unprecedented times and what sorts of changes folks can expect. I know, Maria, you've spoken a bit to the points of some of the technical admissions related elements, but are there any thoughts on what students or potential students can expect, and also any advice around perhaps changes to those strategic decisions students are making in terms of their global locations, the admissions process, the classroom setting, anything that any of you three would like to speak to there?
Yeah, I will answer those questions. I've had lots of experience answering this question. Just to let you know, we've been in previous intakes, as I mentioned during the presentation, flexible on the deadlines because we know people couldn't take the GMAT or the GRE test because of closures. Now things have reopened around the world, so we're going to stick to our deadlines that we published on the website. We have students on campus. and they're all in person. So, of course, there's lots of restrictions. We have the January intake of 2020 who are graduating this December. They're on campus. We have the September 2020 intake, who is also on campus. They arrived this year a little later. Typically, they're on campus around August. This year, they arrived at the end of September. Now, there are many restrictions. For the incoming class, we had sent a survey and giving them options, whether they wanted to have it online, they wanted to have a hybrid model. And I think out of the people, the incoming class, only one person said they would be willing to have online classes. So that meant that INSEAD really didn't have any options on this except to create an environment that would be safe for everyone to be on campus. The incoming class, it's a little smaller than usual because some people deferred to the January 21 intake and then also to the September 1 intake. And that was good so that we could implement some of the restrictions that we have. Everyone is being tested on a weekly basis on both campus. When you arrive on campus, whether you are in the classroom or just on campus, masks are mandatory. When you enter the classroom, we have a little computer that takes your temperature and then sanitizes your hands. And then in the classroom, you are spaced to make sure that everyone is safe. We do have limited staff on campus. So the recruiting team, the admissions team will be working from home probably through January, depending how things improve. So faculty is on campus, the career development team is on campus, student life is on campus. Everyone else that doesn't have face-to-face interaction with students are working remote and will continue so. In France right now, as you probably know, cases have spiked. So I was speaking to colleagues this morning on Zoom and they were saying, you can't get out of your house before 6 a.m. and you can also get out after 9 p.m. So that will be for 4 weeks until the cases go down. And at INSEAD, it's kind of the same. So if you're tested, that's something, you are contagious, you're not on campus. Everyone has to have the app that keeps track of where you've been. So in Singapore, it's mandatory. In France is not, but at INSEAD, we encourage people to have the app so we can keep track if you've been in contact with people who might be contagious. So for now, it's working. We had a couple cases, but those people have been at home. So as long as everyone follows the rules, the system will work. In Singapore, things are getting much better. My colleagues mentioned today that it's been several days with no cases. So that's unbelievable. So now they're moving to stage 3, which means things will start open normally. So given that, we're hoping that the incoming classes will continue to have these restrictions until things seem to be normalized, which it seems like it's going to be a little while. But for now, it's working, and we're happy that we can offer the in-person classes. But in terms of flexibility with deadlines, for now, we have kind of said, let's continue have our normal deadlines because everything seems to be starting to reopen in terms of tests. Unless something happens that we can't foresee, then we'll continue to show flexibility.
Wonderful, thank you. And we're about out of time for questions, so I'll try to once again wrap a few final thoughts into one. From all three of our panelists, any final thoughts or advice for applicants, prospective students, whether they might be career changers, looking to really take advantage of this global perspective? Just any final thoughts for our viewers?
I had one, if Nikhil, if you don't mind. Right. So the way I think about MBA and INSEAD in particular, right? Think of yourself as the product that you want to get the best version of at the end of the MBA, right? So I think that's what I tell everybody who applies to INSEAD. And I think INSEAD, as Nikhil mentioned earlier, is a time where you are in a safe zone. So take all the chance of experiences, whether it's courses, friends, field trips, or any kind of campus exchanges that make you uncomfortable, because those uncomfortable times help you learn the most. And I think that's what I took out of the MBA, right? Take things that you wouldn't do on a normal basis, and INSEAD gives a very, very strong support to help you do that with the faculty, with the career counselors, and take that opportunity in that 10 or 12 months that you get. So that's my final thoughts. Thanks, Haley.
Yeah, spot on. I think Aditya's point is on point. Whether you go to INSEAD or whether you go anywhere else, I think forcefully putting yourself in those uncomfortable situations in a controlled, safe environment is the best way to learn. Kind of building on that, I think of whether it's going to undergrad, whether it's starting your first job, whether it's going to MBA program. These are all kind of opportunities for you to reinvent yourself to be the person that you aspire to be. So, as you're going from as you're going from current working to this MBA program, no one knows you at this MBA program, right? So this is a great opportunity for you to be able to put forth kind of the person you want to be, right? And part of that is putting yourself in these uncomfortable situations that Aditya alluded to. I think in terms of my own commentary, I am probably the best person for INSEAD and the worst person to give commentary just in large about MBA programs. Now when people ask me about MBA programs, I'm like, forget thinking about any other MBA program. Go to INSEAD. I don't care what age you are. I don't care how much work experience you have. And just to kind of give you a little bit from my own experience, when I was going through my in-person interviews for INSEAD, and the alumni, we built a rapport. At the end of it, he's like, Nikhil, get ready for the best year of your life. And I felt comfortable enough with the gentleman to say, hey, that's a pretty bold statement. I've traveled a ton. I love traveling. I've lived in the Middle East, India, Europe, US. So I felt like I had a pretty good life. And I kid you not, that 10-month period was the best 10 months of my life, I think. So happy, and I can keep talking about INSEAD, but highly, highly encourage you to consider INSEAD.
Yeah, thank you. I would say, I know that everyone is going to a tough situation given the COVID-19, but I also would use this as a time to pause, to think about what you want to do next in your career. Certainly going back to school is always an option. You can never lose by going back to school. If you're thinking about an international career, INSEAD really offers you an amazing platform to connect with other people who are global-minded like you. My recommendation is, as you continue researching about different programs, and if you're looking to start an international career, please continue to connect with INSEAD alums. They're a great resource. The best way to connect with them is via LinkedIn. When you type in INSEAD, it will bring you to the university page. And then on the left side, you'll have people, alumni. And then when you click on alumni, you can type your city, you can type an industry, and that will bring a list of alumni in that city. I encourage you to reach out to them. I won't guarantee 100% of the time they will say, yes, I want to chat with you. But if you tell them that you're working on your application, that you're very serious about that, they will be more than happy to give them your time. After this event, you'll get an email from us. We'll get a list of the people who attended the presentation today. We'll send you a follow-up note. If you feel like you want to have one-on-one chat with me, feel free to reach out. I would be happy to speak with you and answer any of your questions. And I wish you the best. Take care and stay safe.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Maria. Thank you, Aditya and Nikhil, for joining us and providing your perspective. Thank you for our viewers who are here tuning in with all of your valuable questions. That's about all the time that we have, but thank you once again. We hope to see you guys back for another of our MBA Spotlight sessions.
Thank you.
Thanks,
Thanks,
Ellie.
everybody.
Bye.
Bye-bye.